It was a regular Tuesday afternoon when Sarah Thompson, a waitress at a small family-owned diner in Hollywood, approached a table in the corner with a hesitant smile. She had seen a lot of celebrities pass through the doors of the diner over the years, but today, she noticed a man seated by the window, a rugged figure with silver hair and piercing eyes. The moment she saw him, she froze. It was Clint Eastwood. Sarah had grown up watching Eastwood's films, mesmerized by the stoic characters he portrayed. His presence in the diner sent a ripple of excitement through her, but she quickly collected herself, reminding herself that he was just another customer. "Good afternoon, sir. What can I get for you today?" she asked, trying to maintain her composure. Eastwood looked up at her, his expression unreadable. "I'll have the usual, coffee, black, and a cheeseburger," he replied in his deep, gravelly voice. "Coming right up," she said, relieved that he hadn't made a big deal out of her initial hesitation. As Sarah went to the kitchen to place his order, she couldn't help but glance over her shoulder a few times. She was fully aware of the quiet hum of anticipation from the other patrons, but she had learned over the years to focus on her job. She returned to Eastwood's table with the coffee and a plate of fries as his burger sizzled in the kitchen. "Thank you," he said, his eyes flicking up to meet hers. He smiled, just a subtle curve of his lips. It was rare to see him smile in person, and Sarah felt her heart race. "No problem at all, Mr. Eastwood," she replied, setting the coffee down with a gentle clink. "Your food should be out soon." "Please call me Clint," he said with a soft chuckle, the kind of laugh that was almost as rare as his smile. She blinked in surprise, not used to being on a first-name basis with anyone of his stature. "Okay, Clint," she said, still a little taken aback. The rest of her shift passed by like any other, with the usual mix of friendly patrons and difficult customers. She kept an eye on Clint's table from time to time, noticing he seemed to be lost in thought as he sipped his coffee. Eventually his burger arrived and he ate it in silence, occasionally glancing out the window at the bustling street outside. As her shift neared its end, Sarah returned to his table to refill his coffee. She'd seen him finish his meal, and she wanted to make sure he had everything he needed before heading out. As she approached, Clint looked up at her again, his blue eyes sharp, yet warm. "You've been a great waitress," he said, surprising her with his directness. "I know the job's tough, but you've handled it with a lot of grace." Sarah smiled, though she couldn't help the blush that crept up her cheeks. "Thank you, Clint. That means a lot." He nodded and reached into his coat pocket, pulling out a small folded piece of paper. He handed it to her without a word. Confused, Sarah took the note, her fingers brushing against his weathered hand. There was something in the way he handed it to her that made her heart skip a beat. "Take care, Sarah," he said, his voice softer now, almost as if he were speaking to an old friend. She glanced at the note in her hand, unsure what to expect. It wasn't like Clint Eastwood to write anyone a note, especially not a waitress. Her curiosity got the best of her, and after walking to the kitchen, she quickly unfolded the paper. The words written on it were short, but the impact was undeniable. In his neat handwriting, the note read, "Life's tough, but you've got the strength to keep going. I see a lot of potential in you. Don't let anything hold you back." Sarah's heart stopped for a moment. She felt as if the world around her blurred, and the weight of the note pressed against her chest. She hadn't expected anything like this from him. Clint Eastwood, the legend. Someone who had lived a life of power and grit. What could he possibly see in her? A waitress struggling to make ends meet. Tears welled in her eyes as the message sank in. It wasn't just a note, it was a reminder, a spark of encouragement in a life that often felt filled with obstacles. She wasn't just Sarah, the waitress at a diner. She was someone who mattered, someone worthy of more. With trembling hands, Sarah clutched the note to her chest, feeling the emotions she had buried for so long begin to bubble to the surface. It had been a tough year for her. Family struggles, financial uncertainty, and the unspoken weight of dreams she hadn't yet pursued. But as she read Clint's words again, she felt a rush of hope. She stood in the kitchen for a few moments, her emotions overwhelming her. No one had ever believed in her like that, especially not someone she had admired from afar for so long. It wasn't just the words themselves, but the fact that Clint Eastwood, a man who could have left without saying anything, took the time to encourage her. The days following Clint's note were transformative for Sarah. Each morning when she woke up, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. The weight of the struggles she had been carrying, financial stress, unfulfilled dreams, seemed lighter somehow, as if the simple act of being seen by someone so influential had given her the strength to believe in herself. She began to make small changes in her life. First, she enrolled in night classes at a local community college, deciding to pursue a degree in business administration. It was a bold step, one that she had put off for years, thinking that the timing was never quite right. But Clint's words echoed in her mind. "You've got the strength to keep going. Don't let anything hold you back." The class was challenging, and balancing it with her job at the diner was tough, but Sarah found that she had more energy and determination than ever before. Her professors noticed her commitment, and even her co-workers at the diner remarked on how her attitude had shifted. She was no longer just getting by, she was living with intention. As weeks turned into months, Sarah's confidence continued to grow. She started taking on more responsibilities at the diner, helping to train new staff and taking on extra shifts. Her natural leadership skills began to shine, and her manager, who had always been impressed by Sarah's work ethic, suggested she consider taking on a managerial role. The idea seemed surreal at first. A manager? Sarah had always dreamed of more, but she had never thought she could actually rise to that level in the hospitality industry. But now, with Clint's encouragement still fresh in her heart, she thought, why not? One evening, after a particularly busy shift, Sarah's manager approached her. "I've been watching you, Sarah," he said with a smile. "I think you're ready for more. How would you feel about stepping into a management position here? You've earned it." Tears sprang to her eyes as she heard the words. It wasn't just a promotion. It was proof that all the hard work and sacrifices had been worth it. With Clint's note and her manager's faith in her, Sarah was beginning to see that the life she had once thought was beyond her reach was now within her grasp. But the biggest change came when she decided to take the leap and apply for a business internship. It felt like a huge risk, especially considering she was still working full-time and attending classes. But Sarah knew it was time to go after the career she had always wanted. She wanted to learn the skills necessary to run her own business, someday, to create something that could make a difference in the world. To her surprise, she received an interview with a well-known marketing firm in the city. She had no idea how she had stood out among hundreds of applicants, but she knew one thing for certain. Clint's words had given her the courage to apply in the first place. The interview was tough, but Sarah held her ground. She spoke about her experiences at the diner, how it had taught her to handle stress, think on her feet, and lead a team. She also shared her vision for the future, how she wanted to help small businesses grow and thrive, just as the diner had done for so many years. By the end of the interview, the hiring manager was impressed. "You've got a strong drive, Sarah," the manager said, smiling. "I think you'd be a great fit for our team." A few days later, Sarah received the call she had been waiting for. She had been offered the internship. It wasn't just a job, it was the beginning of a new chapter in her life. Clint's note had been the catalyst, the moment she realized that her circumstances didn't define her future. It was her drive, her ability to adapt and overcome challenges, that would determine where she went from here. And with that newfound belief in herself, Sarah knew there was nothing she couldn't achieve. Months later, Sarah found herself walking out of the diner for the last time, but it wasn't a goodbye to the memories she had built there. Instead, it was a step toward the future she had long dreamed of. She had earned a spot in the marketing firm, and as she moved into her new role, she remembered Clint's simple words and the impact they had on her life. She never saw Clint again, but she kept that note close to her heart. It wasn't just a message from a famous actor. It was a reminder that sometimes the smallest act of kindness could set someone on a path to greatness. As Sarah settled into her new career and continued to excel, she never forgot the man who had once walked into her life for only a moment but had changed it forever. And each day she carried that note with her, proof that anyone, no matter where they started, had the power to achieve more than they ever thought possible. As Sarah's career in the marketing firm flourished, she began to see the world differently. What had once seemed like impossible dreams now felt like goals within her reach. Her work ethic, honed from years of waiting tables and juggling multiple responsibilities, gave her an edge in the competitive corporate environment. She often found herself recalling the lessons she'd learned along the way, the resilience needed to push through setbacks, the value of hard work, and the importance of believing in herself when no one else did. One evening, after a particularly challenging day at work, Sarah found herself sitting at a cafe, sipping coffee and reflecting on her journey. The hustle of the city outside seemed so far removed from the quiet moments she had spent at the diner, yet everything that had happened felt like part of the same story. It was then that she received a call from her old manager at the diner. "Hey, Sarah," he said warmly. "I know you've moved on, but we've been talking about it here and we all agree. We miss you. You made a real impact on this place, and I wanted to let you know that we'd love to have you back for a reunion, dinner sometime soon, just to see how you're doing and celebrate all the amazing things you've accomplished." A wave of nostalgia washed over Sarah. She hadn't realized how much she missed the people at the diner, the team she'd worked with, the regular customers who had shared their lives with her, and even the long hours that had once seemed so exhausting. It was where everything had started, after all. The reunion dinner was held a few weeks later. Sarah walked into the familiar diner, now feeling like a different person. The same old faces greeted her with smiles and hugs, and there was a sense of pride in the air. Everyone seemed to know how far she had come. Her manager, who had always believed in her potential, stood at the front, beaming. "I don't think I need to say much," he began, raising a glass. "We all know Sarah's story. We've watched her grow from a waitress into someone who's already doing incredible things. But what I want to say is that no matter where you go, you'll always have a home here with us." The warmth of the moment brought tears to Sarah's eyes. She realized then that no matter how much she had changed, no matter how far she had come, her roots would always be here. This place, this community, had shaped her into the person she had become. As the evening wore on, Sarah shared her journey with those she hadn't seen in months. She spoke about the internship that had led to her career, the lessons she had learned, and how much the people at the diner had influenced her. She even shared the story of Clint Eastwood's note and how it had changed everything for her. The room fell silent as she recounted the day she had met him. The connection with her past was powerful. It was clear to everyone in the room that Sarah had not only changed her own life, but had also inspired those around her. Her story was a testament to the power of perseverance, the importance of self-belief, and the lasting impact that small moments of kindness can have. But even as Sarah spoke of her past, she was already looking toward the future. Her time at the marketing firm had opened up new opportunities, and she had even begun to dream bigger, perhaps starting her own consulting firm one day, helping small businesses grow and thrive, just like the diner had done for her. As the night came to a close, Sarah stood up to make her own toast. "I just want to thank you all for everything. This place, this community has been a foundation for me, and I hope that as I move forward, I can pay it forward, just as you all have done for me. You've shown me that it's not where you start, but what you do with what you have that counts." Her voice cracked slightly as she finished, but it was met with cheers and applause. She felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for the people who had been there for her when she had nothing, who had believed in her before she could believe in herself. Walking home that evening, Sarah felt lighter than she had in years. The city's lights twinkled around her, and she couldn't help but feel that the journey she was on was just beginning. She thought of Clint, of the note, of the message that had started it all. It wasn't about fame or fortune, it was about the impact one person could have on another. Clint Eastwood had given her a simple note that changed the course of her life. Now she had the chance to do the same for others. And with that thought, Sarah made a silent promise to herself. She would continue to pursue her dreams, knowing that no matter how high she climbed, she would always remember where she came from. She would never forget the power of kindness, the strength in believing in oneself, and the importance of helping others find their own way. The world was waiting, and Sarah was ready. Years passed, and Sarah's career continued to soar. She had transitioned from the marketing firm to founding her own consulting business, specializing in helping struggling small businesses, especially those owned by minorities and women. The drive that had once come from a place of uncertainty and self-doubt was now rooted in purpose and passion. Each client she worked with felt like a victory, not just for their business but for the communities they served. She had built a reputation as a fierce advocate for underrepresented entrepreneurs, using the resources she had gained to create networks and platforms for them to thrive. Sarah's consulting business grew, and with it she began to offer workshops, mentorship programs, and financial advice to startups that would have otherwise struggled to gain traction in a competitive market. But despite her growing success, Sarah never lost sight of the lessons she had learned along the way. She often found herself reflecting on the people who had played pivotal roles in her life, from the diner crew to her manager who had first believed in her potential, to the professors who had mentored her through college, and, of course, Clint Eastwood. His note still lived in her wallet, worn but cherished. One afternoon, while working on a project for a new client, Sarah received an unexpected call. It was from a publicist at a film studio, asking if she would be interested in joining Clint Eastwood's new charity gala as a guest speaker. Her heart skipped a beat. It had been years since she had thought about that note, but here it was, an invitation to speak alongside the very man who had set her on this path. "I can't believe this," she whispered into the phone. "Are you sure you have the right person? I'm just a small business consultant." "Absolutely," the publicist replied. "Clint has been following your work for some time. He's deeply impressed by everything you've accomplished. He believes you have a story that could inspire others." Tears sprang to Sarah's eyes. The idea that Clint, the man who had set everything in motion with a simple note, had been following her journey felt surreal. After all, she had always seen him as a figure far beyond reach. Now he was extending a hand to her in a way that was both humbling and empowering. The gala was a glamorous event, held in a grand ballroom with crystal chandeliers and guests from all walks of life, including celebrities, philanthropists, and activists. When Sarah arrived, she couldn't help but feel a wave of nerves, but she reminded herself she was here because she had earned her place. Clint Eastwood himself greeted her with a warm handshake. "Sarah," he said, his voice gravelly but kind. "I'm glad you could make it." "Thank you, Clint," she replied, smiling through the emotions welling inside her. "It's an honor to be here." Later that evening, as Sarah took the stage to speak, she found herself looking out at an audience of people who had once seemed like giants to her. She took a deep breath and began sharing her story, the challenges, the setbacks, but most importantly, the transformation that had occurred when one person took the time to believe in her. "I was just a waitress in a small diner, trying to make ends meet when I had the honor of serving Clint Eastwood," Sarah began, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "And after a simple interaction, he handed me a note that changed my life." She paused, allowing the audience to absorb her words. She then shared how that note had inspired her to go after her dreams, even when they seemed impossible. She spoke about her journey from waitress to business consultant, and how she now dedicated her life to helping others achieve their own goals. "The message Clint gave me was simple," Sarah continued. "It wasn't just about believing in myself, it was about seeing the potential in others. And that's what I've made my life's work. I want to empower those who are overlooked, to help them see their worth and their strength." As Sarah concluded her speech, the room erupted in applause. Clint himself stood clapping proudly. Sarah felt a swell of gratitude, knowing that none of this would have been possible without that one act of kindness years ago. Afterward, Clint approached her once again, his smile a little wider this time. "You did well, Sarah. I knew you had it in you." Tears filled Sarah's eyes as she nodded. "Thank you," she said softly. "I couldn't have done it without you." Clint patted her on the shoulder. "You did it all yourself. I just gave you a little push." The evening, ended with Sarah feeling a sense of peace she hadn't known before. She had come full circle, from the shy waitress with big dreams to a successful entrepreneur who now had the platform to help others achieve their own success. As she left the gala, walking through the night with the sounds of laughter and conversation echoing behind her, Sarah realized that Clint's note wasn't just a one-time gesture. As Sarah's influence grew, she became a sought-after mentor, invited to speak at conferences, workshops, and corporate events all over the country. But despite her rising fame and success, she never lost sight of her roots: the diner, her old manager, and the people who had always believed in her, even when she couldn't believe in herself. The phone call she had received from Clint Eastwood had been a turning point, but it wasn't the only one. Every step of her journey had been marked by the support and kindness of others, and Sarah knew that her responsibility was to pay that forward. Her business had expanded beyond what she could have ever imagined. She had started a non-profit organization dedicated to supporting young women in business, providing them with mentorship, resources, and financial aid to start their own ventures. Through this organization, she met hundreds of aspiring entrepreneurs who reminded her of her younger self, the girl who had worked long shifts in a diner, dreaming of something more. One afternoon, while speaking to a group of young women at a conference, Sarah received a text that brought everything full circle. It was from her old manager at the diner who had sent her a picture of the restaurant, now fully renovated and thriving, with a message. "We've kept your seat warm for you, Sarah." A rush of emotion washed over her as she stared at the picture of the diner. It had changed, of course, new coats of paint, updated furniture, but there was something undeniably familiar about it. It was still the place that had given her her start. And as she read the message, Sarah realized that her success wasn't just about the businesses she had helped or the lives she had changed. It was about the people who had believed in her all along. A few weeks later, Sarah found herself back at the diner. The familiar smells of coffee and fried food filled the air, and the warmth of the place enveloped her as soon as she stepped inside. She hadn't expected the flood of memories that came rushing back: the laughter of regular customers, the clinking of dishes in the kitchen, the camaraderie of the staff. It was here that she had learned how to connect with people, how to persevere through tough times, and how to find strength in the smallest of moments. Her manager, who was now the owner, greeted her with a big smile. "I wasn't sure if you'd ever come back," he said, chuckling. "But it's great to see you. This place wouldn't be the same without you." Sarah looked around at the familiar faces, old friends, new employees, and the patrons who had supported her over the years. She smiled, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. "You were always there for me," she said, "and I wouldn't be here today without you." They sat down together at one of the booths, catching up on the years that had passed. Sarah shared stories of her nonprofit and the impact it was having, and her manager talked about the challenges of running the diner in a changing world, but the conversation always circled back to the same thing: the power of community, the importance of lifting others up, and the joy of giving back. As the night wore on, Sarah felt a sense of fulfillment that had been missing from her life. She had spent so much time building her career, expanding her business and helping others, but the simplicity of being back at the diner, surrounded by the people who had shaped her, felt like home. Before she left, Sarah went up to the counter and paid her bill. The cashier, a young woman who looked no older than Sarah had been when she first started working there, smiled at her. "Thank you for everything," the cashier said. "You've inspired so many of us. I hope one day I can make a difference too." Sarah's heart swelled with pride. It wasn't just the big speeches or the nonprofit projects that made her feel accomplished. It was moments like this: the realization that her story, her journey, was now inspiring the next generation of dreamers and doers. Walking out of the diner that night, Sarah paused and looked up at the stars. She had come so far, yet she knew the road ahead was still long. There were more lives to touch, more dreams to ignite, and more ways to pay forward the kindness and encouragement that had shaped her. She thought back to that note Clint Eastwood had given her all those years ago, the simple words that had set everything into motion. Life's tough, but you've got the strength to keep going. It had been the catalyst, the spark. But it was her own resilience, her willingness to take chances and believe in herself that had carried her through the highs and lows. Sarah had proven to herself and to others that no matter where you come from or what challenges you face, the future is always in your hands. And now, with a heart full of gratitude and a soul driven by purpose, she was ready to continue making a difference, one life at a time.